Hello. So, Andy Warhol said in the future we will all have 15 minutes of survivorship bias, and that's what you're going to hear about. My name is Lars Trieloff. You can find me on Twitter. These opinions are my own. The ideas aren't. Let's go back to 2007, which is when I started to work on an exciting new product, on an at least exciting and new for me. And this turned out to be, I would say, the second most successful product that Adobe has right now. No, this is not Photoshop, and this is not any of the other Adobe products that you probably know. This product is called AEM. And AEM means Adobe Experience Manager, and this is essentially a web content management system. And the interesting thing about web content management is that everyone thinks, hey, this should be easy, right? I'm saying every day a programmer wakes up and thinks, today I'm going to write a web content management system. How hard could it be? And I think this is exactly the programmer's credo, right? We do these things not because they are easy, but because we thought they were going to be easy. So there are about 200,000 web content management systems that have been created since 1991. Surprisingly, no web content management systems have been created before that. But the interesting thing, when you look at the top 10 or even just the top 8 list of content management systems, right, according to build width, then it's WordPress, Joomla, Squarespace, Blogger, and so on. And you trim that down to the top 1,000,000 sites, and it gets a bit shorter, this list. And you then drill down to the top 100,000 sites, and suddenly, yeah, my product made it number 3, right? Just through selective filtering. And obviously, the top 100,000 sites have very different needs from the top 1,000,000 sites or the rest of the sites. I think a good way to describe this: these are companies where these are companies that have more money than they have time. Right? They have more money to buy a product that fits their needs than to change their needs to fit the product that they can buy. And let me go back into AEM history, and I promised you ASCII art, and now you can't read it, so I'm going to read it to you. History starts in 1991 when the first web page was published. It ends right here at Monki Gras, and you can see the beer glass. In 1990. I can't even read it here. So in 1997, a product called Open Web got created. This later on got renamed to CQ2 because nobody wants to buy a version number 1, then CQ3, then CQ4, then CQ5, which is exactly when I joined. Later on, the small Swiss company that created this got acquired by Adobe. I have to say, all good Adobe products started through an acquisition, and later on got renamed into Adobe Experience Manager. A good reason for this was CQ stands for communique, and that just sounds too French. It is Swiss, but it still sounds too French. And this is the product that is now powering some of the most important websites, or at least traffic-wise, of the world. And you probably have never used this product, you've never seen it, so I'm going to show you a couple of screenshots, and we're going to start with the oldest screenshot that I could find. Brace yourself, this is a 90s warning. This is, I think this is the most 90s, especially this photo here, this is the most 90s thing I can imagine. This is the UBS homepage. UBS was our first customer, and when you go to the UBS website today, they're still live and they're still using Adobe Experience Manager. And this product was called Open Web. It was basically a very small C binary to the point it had the disadvantage that sometimes it could leak memory, which meant it would fall over. The good thing about being a small C binary is you could just restart it in an endless loop and nobody would notice. Later on, this got turned into CQ2, into CQ3, into CQ4, into CQ5, into, hey, we changed the color theme, into CQ, this is now Adobe Experience Manager, and we changed the color scheme again and added pictures to this. But you can see that the guts of the product, right, the philosophy of the product, very much stayed the same across all of these years. So what are the lessons that we've learned in this process? And in this process, I went through, I found out nine things. And the first thing, and you might ask yourself, okay, why is Santa on here? The first thing that I realized is that I joined about in the middle of the history, right? So I don't even know everything. And what I did is I started talking to people who have been there much longer. I talked to David, I talked to Toby, I talked to Raphael, I talked to Felix, I talked to Jean-Michel, I talked to Alex, who actually joined the same day as I joined. But these are people who know much more about building the product than I do. And they're real graybirds. And the interesting thing, well, let me come back to graybirds. I did a lot of research, I did a bit of yak shaving, and I found an important thing, which is graybirds are sustainability Santas. They are the people who bring you sustainability. And why do they bring you sustainability? Because they've made every single mistake at least 3 times before. So when you are about to make a mistake, they will tell you, I made that mistake in 1997, in 1999, and again in 2003. Please don't do it again. And there's another thing about working on a product for a very long time. It means your own time horizon changes. And Toby said to me, the funny thing about this is when you know that every mistake you make will wait for you 10 years later and you have to fix it, you start thinking much, much harder about the mistakes you're going to make, right? And just spontaneously and intuitively coding. And you start questioning your brilliant ideas. So, because these brilliant ideas are dangerous. So, lesson number 8. You have to take out your garbage. And taking out garbage is never fun, and it takes a lot of work. And one part of this is that a lot of garbage is hidden in places where you don't expect it. Right? So when we thought about APIs in the first place, we thought, well, we do have Java APIs, and this is where we are generating API documentation. So this is our API. And sure, there are a couple of classes, now a couple of 100 classes that are deprecated, but that is our API. Later on, we found out, oh, well, there's more than that. There are REST APIs. There are configuration settings. There's JavaScript APIs. There's even implicit content structure that we just assume to be there. And this means our API surface was much bigger than we thought, and we need to manage everything actively. And there's tooling that can help. So Alex that I talked to, he said, what we did is we collected data of our hosted customers in the managed services business to find out all the configuration settings that no one ever uses, and we just removed them. Right? If a programmer thinks a configuration setting is a good idea, doesn't mean that a customer understands what it is and that a customer ever changes it. So every configuration setting that never got changed gets simply removed. And even settings that got changed very frequently, we simply changed the defaults so that you don't have to change it anymore. And finally, we added a lot of integration tests. Integration tests are enforcing things like if you're breaking compatibility, your commit will get rolled back. If you're adding a configuration setting, your build will get rolled back because you have to ask for you will have to ask for approval for this. And it is also important to manage technical debt in the right way, right? You can treat technical debt essentially as payday loans, and you can live from payday loan to payday loan. This is not a good idea. A better idea is to take your technical debt and to package it, and then to trade it like a CBO. So on top of that, you also have product debt. And product debt are things where you just thought, hey, this might be a good idea to introduce in the product, and then nobody uses it, but every user is confronted with it every single day, and every developer is confronted with it. And I would say product debt is even harder to get rid of than technical debt, because it is visible to end users, and suddenly some end users depend on it. So, talking about deprecation, you should treat deprecation like any ordinary hostage situation, which means no sudden movement. So announce that you're going to deprecate things early on. Announce that things are deprecated. Announce that you're going to remove things that are deprecated. Announce that you're really going to remove things that are deprecated. Announce that you just remove things that are deprecated. And then help people to fix what was broken by unexpectedly removing things that got deprecated for no reason. No, so well, this might sound funny, right? But we have seen customer projects where customers simply lost their source code, right? They said we would like to fix the dependencies where we are using deprecated code, but we can't because we don't have the code anymore. So what we did for these customers is we really traded a technical debt CBO by creating a compatibility package that still had the deprecated APIs in there, that allowed them to install it, right? So technical debt as a package, perfect. So lesson number 7. And now I profusely refuse to update my pop culture references. So you can't start a fire without a spark. And this is very much about integrating creative tensions. Right? When I think about the team that built CQ, I think about people who have extremely prolonged technical arguments. They have technical arguments that last decades. Right? And we have technical arguments about things, whether it's better to modularize everything or to just have a big, simple monolith. Right? And we're still having the same discussions. Right? David and Felix are on two sides of this discussion, and they're having this discussion. Same about static versus dynamic. Should you use static languages? Should you use dynamic languages? Where should you use scripting languages? Where should you use compilation? Where's configuration better and where's convention better? And the funny thing is, you cannot settle any of these arguments ever, because there is no universal truth. There's only one truth. The discussion will make your end product better. The discussion will spark innovation, and the discussion will lead you to finding out better things. Lesson number 6. And you ask, okay, why is that chicken? This is about chicken. Specifically, this is about John Nash's chicken and the game theory of technology adoption. So if you're familiar with game theory, there's this game of chicken. And the idea of the game of chicken is that you can only lose, right? You have two cars that are speeding at each other, and you can either go straight and risk running into the other car, or you can swerve. If you swerve, you are the chicken, you are the loser. So you have a negative payoff. And the bad thing about this is there's a negative expected payoff for both players, right? You're basically, just by starting to play the game, you're screwed. If this sounds familiar for you as technologists, well, welcome to technology. So the thing, whenever you are adapting somebody else's technology, there's always the risk that this somebody else is going to realize this piece of technology that we built is really not that cool, we are going to break compatibility. Right? There's always the risk. Whether it's this cool NPM dependency you're adding to your project or it's a big commercial database, there's always the risk that your vendor will get bored of its own product. For good reason. And the question is, how do you get out of this situation? And in game theory, there's something called commitment device. So when you are in this speeding car and playing chicken, the best way to win the game is to demonstrate that you are never going to swerve. So the solution that game theorists proposed is to have a removable steering wheel that you throw out of the window. Right? You say, I can swerve. I'm going to rush ahead. So what's the equivalent of this? The equivalent in software is adopting a standard. And not just adopting a standard by saying, yeah, we're using it, but adopting a standard and being loud and proud about it. We did this as a very small vendor by, for instance, backing the Java content repository standard and being extremely vocal about this. What this did was two things. On the one hand, it helped promote the standard. But on the other hand, it gave a clear message to all of our customers. It gave the message, if this company is going to break the APIs, is going to deviate from this standard, this is going to be a huge embarrassment for them, so they're not going to do this. And this is how you get out of the game of chicken. By adopting standards, by being vocal about it, and by not just adding the cost of migrating technology, but also by adding the cost of embarrassment to it. So, lesson number 5. And again, this is what David Bowie wrote about JavaScript frameworks. So, right, change in a product that is living 20 years, change is the thing that you can take for guaranteed. Right? We have changed everything. It was originally built as a C program. We, at the height of the Java hype, switched to Java for good reason, right? We switched our persistence format from something that looked like JSON files, even before XML was a thing, to something called Content Bus, to something called Jackrabbit, to something called Oak. So we changed persistence multiple times. We changed our templating language. We used ECMAScript on the server side before it was cool, and then switched to JSP, seeing it become uncool, and then switched to scripted programming, to scripted templating languages. We used our own web servers, right? We started with a homegrown web server, then used Tomcat, because that was the industry-adapted standard. Then we thought, hey, we can do better than this. We can reinvent the wheel, build our own server again, and then switched again to an industry standard, this time Jetty. And we did the same thing with UI frameworks. So change is always going to happen, right? So the technology that you're using, whatever technology, and I didn't realize this when I started. I thought I thought technology was easy, right? When I started my career, I thought there was new technology which is good and cool, and there's old technology that is bad and uncool. Now I know there's only technology that is cool now, but it's going to be old and uncool technology very, very, very soon. So have a plan for that. So I said everything is going to change. Nothing lasts forever. That's a lie. Architecture lasts forever. There are a couple of, in geopolitics, we say geography is destiny. And I would say in software, architecture is destiny. And it's not this kind of architecture that you think of in UML diagrams, but it's about some of the very, very basic decisions that you're making in a product, which is frying versus baking, which means does the content get put together into an HTML document on request, or do you do that before? The separation between one system that is responsible for creating the content and one system that is responsible for delivering the content. And the funny thing is, this is something that is now enforced through actually having two separate server environments. This started as something as simple as having 2 different directories. Version control. First version of the content management system was based on RCS, if you remember what that is. How extensibility and scripting is built in. And I think most importantly, having a strong focus on users. Users are always going to guide you what is important and what they want. I'm going to wait for James to take the photo of the slide before I continue with lesson number 3. And I'm a big believer in reinventing the wheel. And when I thought when I was searching for nice quotes on reinvention, I found this gem by Dave Weiner, who wrote, "God bless the reinventors," when he found out about JSON. And obviously implying that this is a bad idea. And Doug Crockford said, the good thing about reinventing the wheel is that you can get around one. Right? So reinventing the wheel is not just a good idea, it's necessary. As long as you have cars and as long as you have roads and as long as the material that you have available is improving, you're going to need wheels and you're going to need better wheels. So keep reinventing them, right? Keep improving them. And there's another quote. The good thing about reinventing the wheel is the second time you invent it, you already know what you want to achieve, right? You're not just experimenting with the material, you know what you want to achieve. And one of my colleagues said, you know what, Lars? Old wine in new wineskins can be fun if you're in the wineskin business. And I think we all are. So, lesson number 2, avoid the roller coaster and take the stairs. And when it comes to innovation, right, we are all used to taking the roller coaster, which Gartner is calling the hype cycle. Right, we ride it up to the peak of inflated expectations, and then woo, we go down. Bad idea. What we do is we do something called stepwise innovation. Instead of replacing the entire architecture in every big product iteration, we only replace one piece, right? So we don't replace our hardwood floor while elsewhere we are replacing the roof, because it might rain and this will ruin your old and your new hardwood floor. On the other hand, the steps in your stepwise innovation, don't make them so big that nobody can follow you. And even if you're making steps, you need to provide ways of giving your customers additional accessibility, right? And this includes migration scripts, this includes tooling, this includes education. Don't make the steps too big, but take the steps. So, lesson number 1, last lesson, is that sustainability is about culture, right? I talked a lot about product and a lot about engineering tricks, but in the end, it is about culture. And if you want to establish a sustainable culture, you have to follow these 3 simple rules. Okay, I lied. There is no rule book for culture, but there are a couple of things that I've observed. Number 1 is empathy, right? You should treat your users as humans and not as personas, or not as milk cows that you have to milk for their money, right? That you have to consume for their money, as we've heard earlier. These are your users and your customers. These are real people. One thing that we do to encourage this understanding is that we send engineers onto actual customer projects, right? And these are people who are in the core product engineering, who get sent to a customer project to see their code wreak havoc at a customer side. This is the best lesson in empathy that you can get. Right? The second part is to encourage curiosity, right? To take large-scale risks, to do things like, hey, what would happen if we would replace all of our C code with Java code? And treat it as an experiment, right? So there's not a single decision that you're ever going to make that is sacrosanct, that is going to live forever. So stay curious and try new things, keep innovating. And I think the last part is about how do you transmit culture? How do you get culture into the heads of people? And you do this in two ways. You do this through stories, through storytelling, through sharing experiences, but you also do it through establishing essentially hard goals. So a couple of hard goals that we established were things like, this is the maximum size of the binary distribution that we are going to deliver. What did this do? This essentially enforced having a strict regime of dealing with dependencies. What is the maximum start time that we will allow? What is the maximum page publishing time? And so on. So we enforced a couple of rules and actually put them into our continuous integration system to exemplify our culture of sustainability. So another trick is to take Conway's law and to turn it around. Right? So Conway's law is basically saying if you have two groups in your company that are building a product, you will end up with two modules that are not talking to each other. So instead of letting your product architecture follow your organizational architecture, design your organizational architecture so that you get the desired product architecture by default. In the end, sustainability is, when we think about sustainability, we think a lot of, okay, what are the steps that we did in the past? So it might even confuse you to thinking that sustainability is about the past. It's not. It's about the future. And when it comes to the future, I asked for one last lesson. I asked everyone that I talked to, and I asked, when did you realize that this could become a 20-year product, that this could become a 20-year job for you? And the answer that I got from all of them was, I never realized that it could be a 20-year product. I never realized that it could be a 20-year job until the day I got the watch. And I think most interestingly, my boss who started this whole thing, he said, nobody ever had a master plan. Thank you.